Good evening, afternoon, everyone. Yeah, it's great to be able to introduce Ezinne Chima. She's a passionate language teacher, as you will see in her webinar. She's from Nigeria. She has over 10 years teaching experience, and she's a member of ELTN, the main teacher association in Nigeria. Her flair for supporting teacher professional development has spurred her into inspiring and mentoring teachers and guiding them through discovering professional development action plans to meet our 21st century ELT needs, which of course we're all aware of. She's facilitated teacher training workshops, physically face-to-face and virtually online for language teachers in Nigeria. And she has already been sharing some ELT innovative teaching strategies with her colleagues. And she has more to share with you today. So over to Ezinne to begin the webinar. Over to you.
All right. Thank you, Linda. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. Today, our focus is on practical strategies for building oral confidence in the ELT classroom. And these are our objectives. Today, we'll be looking at common barriers that actually make our students or learners to hold back from speaking in the classroom. And then we'll move on to explore the psychological strategies that we could employ as teachers to help our learners overcome these common barriers. And then we look at the pedagogical techniques that we could employ in the classroom as teachers to help our learners build oral confidence gradually. And then we move on to examine the testimonies of ELT practitioners. All right, the next slide. Now, what is oral confidence? Please, I would like to get your opinion. I know the topic is not new to us. So when you hear of oral confidence, what comes to your mind? Please, I would like to get your opinion in the chat box. Okay, sharing your opinions through speaking without being shy. Lovely. It's related to speaking skills and oracy skills. Excellent. Learner feeling during speaking. That's learners feeling during speaking, okay? Oral confidence for me is the courage that our students have to express their thoughts through articulation. Okay, now basically oral confidence is the ability to speak clearly and comfortably without fear, especially in the public. Now, in our various classes, we have learners of varying speaking abilities. We have the high confidence speakers, we have the moderate confidence speakers, and we have the low confidence speakers. The high confidence speakers are these learners who are always willing to make contributions in the classroom. They don't wait for the teacher to call on them to answer questions or air their view or to participate in what is happening in the classroom. These class of learners are the high confidence speakers. Then we have the moderates. These ones, they will wait for the teacher to call on them before they could make their contributions. And then we have the low confidence speakers. These learners or students, they try as much as they can to avoid even having eye contact with the teacher. They try to, they try to hide their faces so that the teacher will not call them up to do something in the classroom. Next slide. Okay, Steve, hold on, go back to the okay. Now, let's look at the picture we have on the screen. We have about 3 students having three arrows of different colors on them. Can you identify which is a high confidence speaker, who amongst them is a low confidence speaker, and who amongst them is the moderate confidence speaker? Just look at the picture closely. Look at the picture. We have three learners, three students having three arrows on them. We have the pink arrow, we have the blue arrow, we have the lemon arrow. Which is the high confidence speaker? Which is the low confidence speaker? Which is the moderate confidence speaker? Please, can you respond in the chat box? Okay, pink, moderate. Oh, lovely. Purple, moderate. Pink, low. Okay. Blue, high. Okay. Blue, green, low. Okay. Blue, high. Okay. Now, when you look at the picture closely, you discover that the student that has the blue arrow on her is the high confident. You could see how she has raised her hand very well, confidently willing to answer the question that the teacher has asked. And then you could see the one that has the pink arrow on her. You could see that she's not raising the hand confidently. She raised her hand halfway. And then the other one that has the lemon arrow on her, it's pretending to be copying notes. In other words, she's trying to avoid having an eye contact with the teacher so that she will not be called on to answer the question. All right, the next slide. Okay, now let's take this activity. In a classroom discussion about the topic, my favorite hobby, Emeka waits until his friend speaks first, then quietly shares a few things about football. And then B, Iroma avoids eye contact with the teacher. She stays silent even though she has something to share. And then C, Adaku immediately raises her hand to talk about painting. Which of these scenarios, A, B, or C, describe high, moderate, and low confidence speakers? Please answer in the chat box. Okay, C, high. Okay, Adaku. Please, I want to get more responses. Okay, C high, B high, B low, C high, Adaku high. Okay, all right. Okay, we could see from this that Emeka is a moderate confidence speaker, Iroma is a low confidence speaker, while Adaku is a high confidence speaker. Next slide. All right. Self-efficacy theory by Bandura was adopted to support this topic. Bandura is of the opinion that the belief one has in one's capability has a way of making one to perform tasks and succeed in such tasks. But if reverse is the case, one is likely going to avoid taking up tasks. I don't know if you agree with me. You discover that in our classes, you have this set of people who are always wanting to make contributions in class. From the beginning of the term, you discover that it's as if that they were selected. They will just be the ones wanting to talk from the beginning of the term to the end of the term. Then you have this category of people who will never want to speak in the classroom. I don't know if you agree with me. Okay, the next slide. Okay, now Bandura has highlighted 4 sources of self-efficacy. The first one is the mastery experience. The mastery experience has to do with the one's previous successes or achievements. You know, when you have done something in the past and you succeeded, it has a way of boosting your confidence. It has a way of motivating you to do more. And then we have the vicarious experiences. The vicarious has to do with, you know, one watching one's peers doing things and succeeding in it. And one is like, if my mates can actually do this and succeed, I can as well do it. So it has a way of when you watch your mates, do things and succeed. It has a way of boosting your confidence. And then we have the next one, the verbal source, which has to do with the encouragement that we get from either peers or teachers. When a teacher is telling a student, just do it, it has a way of boosting the confidence of that student. Then the next one is the physiological or affective source. This has to do with one's ability to manage stress, one's ability to manage fear. You discover that there are some persons before they begin to do something or begin to talk in the classroom, you see them taking a very deep breath. It has a way of boosting their confidence to talk. Now, there's also an activity in this section. We have these sources on column A, and then we have the descriptions on column B. Please, can you match each source of self-efficacy in column A with the appropriate description in column B? Please match and just put your responses in the chat box. 1B, 2A, 3D, 4C. Is that right? Okay. 1B, 1B, AB, 1B, 2C, 3A. Okay, 1 is B, 2 is A, 3 is C, Y, 4 is D. Okay, next slide. Okay, looking at this picture, in one word, 1 or 2 words, what do you think are the common barriers to your learners' oral confidence? What do you think are the factors that actually make your learners to hold back from speaking in the classroom? Please just drop shyness. Thank you. Shyness, excellent. Not knowing enough language, great. Shyness, anxiety, great. Shyness and lack of experience, shy. Anxiety, lack of confidence. Gender inequality, not confident. Shyness and lack of self-esteem. Lack of interest. All right, next slide. Okay, these are the common barriers, although not exhaustive, that could actually make our learners to hold back from speaking in the classroom. Some of our learners are just quiet in nature. Some of them are afraid of making mistakes. Some of them are afraid of what could be their classmates' judgment about them. Some are afraid of classroom dynamics, especially in mixed schools. Like I teach in a mixed school where you have the boys and the girls together in the classroom, especially if you handle the teenagers at the teenage age. They are always very comfortable. They don't want to do things that will really make the opposite sex to look down on them. Then another one is not having confidence in themselves. A feeling of nervousness can actually make a learner or student not want to talk in the classroom. Some of them is because they don't have enough vocabulary to really express themselves in the target language. And some of them is as a result of their cultural background. Some are not exposed to speaking in the public. So these are common barriers that could actually make them not want to talk in the classroom. Now, how do we help them to overcome these barriers? And then how do we help them to build confidence or gradually? Next slide. All right. These are the strategies that we could employ to help our learners overcome these barriers. It's important that you build, as a teacher, you build a supportive classroom atmosphere for it's just like what we usually do here before a session starts. Steve will read out the house rules. So you could actually, guide your learners at the beginning of the session or at the beginning of the term to suggest ground rules that will guide the class. Ground rules such as be respectful, be friendly, be polite, appreciate everyone's effort. They could suggest it and test it on the walls of their classroom. By so doing, you are building a supportive classroom atmosphere for your for your students that could help them want to speak in the classroom. The next thing is encourage growth mindset. Yes, it's important we let them to know that everyone gets better over time. After all, Rome was not built in a day. And then normalize error as part of learning. Don't, their errors could help you develop further lessons for them, lesson plans for them. You don't have to always dwell on errors at all times. Then it's also important you as a teacher celebrate the students' small wins. Appreciate not just perfection, not just perfection. Find a way to always appreciate the effort they are putting in, participating in what is going on in the class, especially when it has to do with speaking. And then try as much as you can as a teacher to reduce pressure. Sometimes my students, when I call them to do certain things in the classroom, and I discover that the students are anxious, I try to do certain things. Sometimes I'll use my demonstration, like do like this for them. I'm trying to tell them to calm down. Okay, so that has a way of, helping them to overcome these barriers that we talked about. I don't know which of these that you do already. Please, can I get your response in the chat box? A and D, I'm doing it also, and to adopt is C. Okay, excellent. A, B, C. Okay, I use most of these. Okay, I do B and D. Okay, I want to encourage you to try at least the 5 of them. It will really help you, it will really help your learners to overcome these barriers. Next slide. Okay, now as teachers, how do we support our learners to build confidence gradually? What are those practical techniques that could help us, or that we could employ in the classroom to help our learners build confidence gradually? I know you as a teacher, you may have identified those ones who are having in your classroom, who are having issues with speaking. How do we help them to build confidence gradually? This is not something that is done just like that. It takes time to build. It takes time to build. Yeah, the first one is scaffolding. Yes, you could allow your students to, participate in what is going on in the classroom silently. You could introduce questions that has choral responses, whereby you ask a question and the whole students respond at the same time. It has a way of making even those quiet ones to want to join others to speak. Of course, they know that their own voices may not really be identified. So they want to join others to talk when they are talking. So you could start with that. You could also introduce questions that require one-word answer, or the one we call the polar questions. What is your favorite food? Rice. What is your hobby? Dancing. You could also, introduce short phrases. You ask questions that they will not really say so many things. They will just use short phrases to respond to your question. And then you could also introduce them to small group discussion. It's very important. They feel free discussing among their peers. They feel safe, discussing. So you could also, allow them discuss share them in groups before you can call them up to make presentations in the whole class. The next thing is engagement. It's important as teachers, we incorporate engaging speaking activities into our lessons. It's very, very important. Integrate collaborative activities that will make them want to, work with their mates in the classroom. It's also important that we are purposeful in integrating activities into our lessons. You really want to get these students to talk. You really want to get them to learn how to speak. So you have to be deliberate about it. You have to be intentional. Design activities like role play that could allow your learners use language in real life. It has a way of, making them want to speak out in the classroom. Next slide. Okay, now before we take our activities, I want to introduce what I have in my hand. This is a dice. I actually use the sentence starters to construct the dice. The sentence starters is on my favorite color. Well, when we came back from Christmas holiday early this year in January, the first topic I actually handled with the students was speaking. I tried to encourage the students to share their experience. I mean, their Christmas holiday experiences. So I discovered that when I came to the class, I wanted them to, share their experience. It was just about 3 or 4 students who were willing to share their experiences. I thought of what to do. I thought of, highlighting some sentence starters on the board that could really help them share their experience. And I discovered that after I wrote about 12 or 15 sentence starters on how I spent my Christmas holiday, they were willing to share their experiences following the sentence starters. And that was how this topic was actually bettered. Now, this box I have here is a dice that I constructed using my best color. Now, this is, I don't know if you can see my best color. So you could do something like this. Look at this is sentence 1. You could see one here, sentence 1, and you could see an arrow. The arrow will point you to the next sentence. So look at it. It's actually on my best color. My best color is you get the students to, complete the sentence. My best color is maybe blue. Then you turn the box towards the direction of the arrow. That's 2. I like it because it is bright. And then you move to the next one. It makes me feel dash. The students will feel it makes me feel cool. And then you move to the third one. It reminds me of dash. Blue reminds me of the sky. And then you look at the arrow. The arrow is pointing down. You move it towards this direction. You have, I like wearing clothes with dash color, blue color, of course. Then you turn it, following the arrow, turn it and get to 6. When I build my house, I will paint it blue. So you can actually, that's the game my students, the pictures that we have on the slides, that's the game my students were actually playing in the picture. So you could as well introduce it to your students. It has a way of making them to talk. You've already had the starters for them. It's just for them to complete this, the sentences. Now, can we take this activity on the screen? That will lead us to the next thing we are going to discuss. During a lesson on personal introduction, Miss Ada asked students to introduce themselves. Ike nervously stood up and began, I hail from, without saying his name first. But before he could finish, Miss Ada interrupted sharply. No, that's wrong. Ike, feeling embarrassed, sat down quietly. And now, in giving feedback, how would you rephrase Miss Ada's comment to encourage motivation rather than discourage? Please answer in the chat box, okay? Kefiale, sorry if I couldn't pronounce your word correctly. Ada needs to encourage, to express freely and give time for contemplation rather than providing corrective feedback, okay? I would ask Ike to follow the given instruction or ask him politely if he understood the instruction and start over. Okay. Please, Linda, can you help me read more responses we have in the chat box?
Yeah, we have, people are interacting really well in the webinar today, which is brilliant. Lots of others here like, can you start by saying your name? Or I'll let them finish and then correct them, allow them to finish time, encouraging, giving them contemplation time. That's important, isn't it? So that they can think about it first. Good try, but you could start it with something, provide some sentence starters. Using the sandwich feedback. Great, you can do better by beginning the introduction with your name. Okay, lots of great suggestions there.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Next slide. All right, these are suggested responses that Miss Ada would have used. Sounds great, but you could begin this way. It would have been better than the way she interrupted the students. Great effort. Why not begin with your name? Okay, let's move to the next slide. Okay, now this brings us to feedback. As teachers, we have to be careful the way we give our feedback. As teachers, you give friendly and gentle feedback. It's very, very important. And then guided discussion, structure your students into different groups and give them topics to discuss first before you could call them to present in the front of the whole class. Another thing is reflective or self-assessment tools. This work like magic. So you could guide your students to have speaking checklists where it helps them to actually track their progress. It could be daily or weekly speaking logs. You help them to create it. You could also help them to, create peer support framework where their peers help to assess them. You could also help them to, create things that will really help them track their emotions when they spoke, how they felt when they spoke, or how they didn't feel when they spoke in the classroom. So I don't know, which of these reflective tools do you feel will suit your learners? Kindly respond in the chat box. What works for me better in classroom setting? Gifts, okay? I guide my students to develop speaking techniques. Mohammed, okay? 3 and 4, Hosea, great. 5, Christiana, okay? 5, Bekele, okay. Next slide. Okay, now we look at the testimonials from different ELT practitioners. The first is success with daily speaking routines. This person says, every morning I have students speak about their previous day for 2 minutes. A student who struggled to speak in full sentences now speaks fluently during these daily check-ins. And then success through storytelling. This person says, I encouraged my students to tell personal stories in English. A reserved student who had trouble speaking in class surprised me by telling a long and vivid story in front of everyone, something I never thought possible before. Then through success through speaking checklist. This person said, I implemented a speaking checklist for my students to self-assess after every oral task. One student who was unsure of his performance started to speak more confidently, knowing exactly what areas to improve on. Yeah, I said it earlier on that this checklist help It really helped the students to track their progress. Then 4, success through games. In my class, I introduced a game where students had to act out scenarios based on English phrases they learned. One student who was always shy surprised me by taking the lead in a group role play. It was a turning point for his confidence. Okay, next slide. Okay, now, do you think as teachers, we might face challenges implementing these strategies and techniques we have discussed so far? If yes, in 1 or 2 words, what do you think the potential challenges are? Please, can we respond in the chat box? Yes, we've talked about how to help our learners overcome barriers of speaking in the classroom psychologically. And we've also discussed the pedagogical techniques that we could employ as teachers to help our learners build confidence gradually. Do you think we might likely face challenges in the classroom trying to put into practice these strategies and techniques? Kindly drop your response in the chat box. Okay, please, Linda, can you help me read the responses we have in the chat box?
Yes, okay. People are saying challenges may differ from class to class, teachers' commitment and competence, time constraint. Yeah, I'll put one idea of my own saying that sometimes learners need so much help individually that there's just simply not enough time in the class, is there? Cultural barriers, time pressure from Gizachu, use of the mother tongue, yeah, time as well. I think that's all for now. Thank you
Okay,
everyone for the comments.
all right. Next slide. Okay, now these are the challenges that the teachers are likely going to face trying to put into practice these techniques and the strategies we've discussed so far. And these are suggested solutions to it. Now, we're going to do a little exercise. Can you match each of those challenges to their respective solutions? The challenges are on the left side, while the solutions are on the right side. Okay, kindly drop your responses in the chat box. Okay, 1C. Okay, 1C, favor. Fozia, 1C. Okay, 1C, 2D. Okay, 1C, 2A. Okay, send in more responses. 4B. How about 5? 3E. Okay, 5B. Aminat. Okay, Rebecca, 4B. 5E. Oh, 1C. D, 3A, 4B, 5E. Okay, all right. For large class size, a C, you could use pair or group interaction. And then for mixed ability levels, it's D, differentiate speaking task. And then for time constraint, it's E, integrate brief but high impact speaking activities. And then for dominant students, it's important you allow your students to take turns in the classroom. If not, the dominant ones will always want to be the one talking in the classroom. And then 5, reluctant participation. It's A, choose engaging and relatable topics to the age you teach. If you teach the young persons, those in primary, you choose topic that relates to them. If you teach the teenage age, like this is an era of technology, you could choose technology related topics. You discover that they will actually pique interest and the discussion. The next slide. Wow. Okay. You can actually try out this course in British Council. You can go to our website, that's the British Council website. You will see this course. You can register, you run the course at your pace. It will really equip you how to teach speaking. It will really equip you with lots and lots of strategies that could help you, build your learners' confidence gradually. Next slide. All right, these are the takeaway toolkits. We have A to J. We have A to J. Now, what I want to say here is that to get our learners build confidence in speaking gradually, we must, as teachers, be intentional about it. We have to be intentional in designing lessons that could actually motivate our students to speak in the classroom. So I would like you to go through the points that are highlighted here from A to J. You pick at least 3 that you are going to try, so that by next week, I'm happy that school is in session. I don't know, in my area, school is in session now. So you are going to try so that by the time we come back for the follow-up in the Telegram group, you share your experience with us. We have 1 A to J. So just pick 3 that you are going to try, so that you share your experience with us, so that we could also learn from your experience. Oh, thank you for joining. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you so much, Ezinne. That was so interesting. And we had so much interaction in the chat. So many people were putting their own ideas and responding to the tasks, for example. So I can tell everyone's really interested in this and it's relevant. And we did have quite a few questions. So I'll start by asking the questions that were in the chat. If we have time afterwards, then we can open it up to people putting their hands up if they want to. So the first question, what would you suggest for students with cultural differences in consolidating proficiency of speaking? So this is when you have a class with several different cultures represented in the class. What would you suggest?
I think for me, I had already mentioned that of the use of storytelling. You could allow them share stories or tales from their different cultural backgrounds. I think it has a way of, let them share their tales or stories from their cultural backgrounds. It has a way of making them, speak in the classroom. I don't know if I've answered that question.
I think that's a great idea of making them interested in each other, isn't it? So if you bring in these different cultural differences, maybe different experiences, it integrates the classroom. It's more inclusive as well. So yeah, great. Another one here on the topic of inclusivity. How can you design an inclusive assessment for learning for low to moderate level English language speakers to build oral confidence? So this is low level speaking tasks, but making sure they are inclusive. Any ideas?
Well, I think I'll suggest that the person check the British Council website. You'll see a lot of topics topics on that. You see a lot of topics on that will really help you do that. You even see prepared lesson plans there that you could guide you properly to design EOS. That's my suggestion. Thank you.
It's a great idea. What about one just in the chat just now? How many times a week should the teacher teach speaking?
Well,
What do you think?
it depends on what you want to really achieve from the students. Like I made mention of a particular checklist, that of daily routine, making speaking a daily routine. You can decide to, allow your students to talk either 2 minutes or 3 minutes before the topic of the day, every day that you have lesson with them. It has a way of, everybody must not talk. You could share them, maybe 5 persons take their daily routine today, next lesson, another 5 persons will take theirs, just like that. Before you know it, everybody in the class must have taken turns to talk. I don't know if I've answered the question.
And somebody's saying that speaking is a skill that has to be taught on a daily basis. It probably is, isn't it? But then we do have to often, of course, cover reading, writing, grammar, maybe sometimes as well. Yeah, great. I do think it helps students if they're not talking in front of the whole class, which is a bit intimidating. If they're all just talking to their neighbour, talking in pairs, talking in small groups, I think that helps, doesn't it? And also, of course, for low level, feeding in the language beforehand, giving them choices so they don't have to come across things they don't know how to talk about. So you're feeding in all the possible language they might need first. Okay, another one. This is related. How can a teacher help students who lack adequate vocabulary? Can you use the first language in class? What's your view on that?
Okay, yes. If I really understood your question, sometimes I do in the classroom. I do it in the classroom. I bring in, I do contrastive linguistics. Like I bring in I compare the target language with I compare the target language with the English words. Sometimes I will tell them, what do you want to say? Say it in, because I actually understand their dialect. I actually understand my learner's language. So most times I tell them to say what you want to say in Igbo.
And that's great, isn't it?
That's their language.
Yeah,
So when they say it, I will interpret it in English, then it will help them pick it. So I
yeah.
actually could allow them sometimes to code switch or code mix in the
Yeah.
classroom.
And I think that's so much more acceptable now, isn't it? It didn't used to be. It used to be that we had to have only English. But again, that's
Yes,
too difficult for many of the students, isn't it? So I think
yes.
it's a great idea to bring other languages into class, to help them, to get them, if they don't know, to be able to say a few words or code switch in their first language, especially when we have more than one first language in the class, which I know happens a lot. So we've got to be able to do that, haven't we? Yeah. Great. A few people in the chat asking, how do we help shy students speak up? And how can I make the students actively participate? I think most of the stuff you were saying in the webinar was addressing that, wasn't it? Have you got one particular tip to help shy students to participate actively? What's your favorite tip?
I mentioned getting them, there's a time I mentioned that you can ask a question that required that the whole of the class give their response at the same time. So that could as well. Then you could use game. There are different games. That's one. We have games for low learners, like this. There's this one that they call a mystery object, whereby an object is hidden in a bag, and a learner comes out to describe the object without mentioning the object. You could also have, you could allow your students to play. There's another game that is called Truth and a Lie, whereby a learner comes out in front of the classroom, in front of the class to say three sentences, to make 3 sentences. 2 are truth about him or her, 1 is a lie. So after the learner is a game actually, after the learner had made the three sentences, 2 out of the 3 sentences will be right, 1 will be wrong. So the students, that's the classmates, will try to argue over which ones are true, and which you discover that everybody will, you get even those quiet, they will not even know when they'll begin to speak in the classroom. Once the argument is going on, this group, they are saying this one, maybe the learner has said, I have 2 sisters, and okay, let me use 2 sentences, not 3 now. I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and I have 2 sisters, I have 2 brothers. And it's possible that they know that the learner has just 2 sisters and just a brother. So by the time they begin to argue, you see that even those ones that you feel they are quiet will be motivated. They may not even know when they will begin to join others to argue over that matter. And by so doing, they are speaking in the classroom. So I think you could
It's about
actually
making them
try.
want to respond, isn't it? Because if it's something true or false, they want to say that's true, that's false. If it's something
Yes,
personalized, they want to contribute something, and everybody likes speaking about themselves, don't they? So great. There's a question here that's come up twice. How do you correct mistakes made in speaking? And same question again, how do you handle mistakes kindly? Okay, so what
yes.
do you do
That's
for
also
mistakes?
another areas that most teachers miss it. Most times, I'll tell you what I do. I don't really like interrupting my students, especially when they are answering questions. So I allow them to finish answering the questions, and then I will tactically pick their errors and use it to discuss. I handle the teenagers, so there's a way you will correct them in class. It will really affect them. So I'm always careful about that. So I think it's good we also adopt that. Some you don't just interrupt them as they are speaking, and incidentally they make a mistake. You try to interrupt. No, he's wrong. He's wrong. No, 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 no. It's not that. You allow the students to finish saying what he or she wants to say, and then you could sometimes you could even do anonymous what is it called, this correction that they will not know who actually made the mistake. So it's also good we adopt that. Most times I do that after I've given them something for writing skill, not really for speaking skill. I'll pick out their errors and then use the lapses that I noticed from the students, and then make corrections, and nobody will know who made the error. So that's also another good way to give feedback in the classroom.
Great, great. Yeah. I always call errors in my classes their value for money, because if they get any of their personal errors corrected, they're getting more, they're not paying for the classes anyway, but they get more value for their class. And this is personal feedback. I think if the teacher thinks that correcting errors are bad, then they'll pass on that idea to the students. So the teacher's got to be completely convinced that errors are good. It's part of the learning process, and we learn so much from them. And what I usually do is listen while they're speaking and write down some of the errors. And then I put those errors on the board at the end. And when the students have got brain space at the end, they can then, in pairs, think about what was wrong and how to correct it. Because when they're speaking, they don't have that actual brain space to correct it or to take in the correction, do they? So yeah, that's post-task error correction that I think is quite effective. Okay, and then there's another question here. If the language of instruction is different to the L1, the first language, can it be a barrier? I think this is a huge question, isn't it, for lots of countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, where people learn their language of instruction when they start going to school, but it's not the same as the first language. How does that interact with your ideas for teaching English, Ezinne?
Yeah, I think I've already talked about bringing in the local language into the classroom. It's also important that sometimes I do that with even grammar. I try to compare the differences that we have in English grammar and their local language. So it helps them away. Okay, let me give you an example now. In use of determiners, like you say, one book. In there, where I teach, the language, they'll say one book, two books, but in their own local language, they don't say, they could say one book, it's the same, the rule is the same, but for two is not the same. Instead of placing the determiner in front of the noun, the determiner for their local language comes after. So most times I try to bring in that so that they will really understand that this is the difference between. So I think if it shouldn't really be a challenge, you can allow the local language, you can allow it to be brought into, but you must not lose focus of the target language in the classroom. So I
That's
don't
the
know if
point, isn't it? So we can't lose the focus of English, but of course we can bring in the others. And people are saying in the chat as well, as long as they help the learning and help the learners learn, of course we can bring in all their languages. We've got to. This is part of us understanding our learners, isn't it? Which is the theme, the British Council theme of these 3 months. And yeah, and we're understanding our learners more every time, aren't we? By this. Great. Okay, one final question, I think, and then I think we'll accept Azrat's hand up. How can you reduce the fear of failure?
Fear of failure. I think that is better done by giving them psychological support. You know, I mentioned it earlier on. You know, everyone, even as teachers, we all had one time or the other when we tried to do something and we failed. Okay, so you try to, you know, speak to your learners, the students, let them understand that everybody would definitely get better over time. I use them, and is there an adage is saying that Rome was not built in a day. It's as they grow, as they practice, that they will get better, as they practice, that they will continue to get better. So I don't know if I've answered the question.
I think that's a great answer. There was one other question about a resource person, and I asked, what do you mean by a resource person? Can we bring a resource person into class? What was that about? We've got 1 or 2 minutes left. If the person who asked that would like to unmute, or if you have any other comments on that, or any other burning questions that somebody would like to unmute, put up your hand, and we can ask you one final question. There was a hand up
So
just
can
now.
I say something? Yes.
Can you put
Can
your
I say
hand up?
something? Good evening, once again.
Who is this speaking?
Looks like it's Felicia. Felicia, can you please?
Felicia is speaking.
Yes,
Felicia.
please go ahead.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
please
go
ahead.
ahead.
Okay,
Go
I
ahead,
just want
Felicia.
to ask if we can get the recording of this lesson, because network was really bad. I couldn't get everything. It was showing me off and on, in and out, rather.
Yes,
so
of
can we
course.
get the recording of this lesson?
Of course. As always, all the webinars, they're all on the Africa.teachingenglish website, so you can get them all. Yes, great. I think I'll hand over to Steve now to finish with the final 2 slides to advertise the next webinar. And thank Ezinne so much for your great eye-opening presentation. And thank you everybody who's come to for your interaction, all your ideas as well.